Paris on Politics from Fox 32 Chicago.
Some opening shot thoughts. Everywhere you look, there's another think piece about the Democratic Party's identity crisis. The internal squabbling is the subject of countless op-eds, cable news stories, and social media screeds. And it's only been amplified with the emergence of New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani, who plowed through the Democratic primary to win the nomination. It's caused a fair bit of hyperventilation in some Democratic circles and laid bare the divisions in the party. Count former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel as a Democrat who doesn't believe Mamdani represents the party. His recent op-ed in the Wall Street Journal is entitled, "My Party's Future Isn't Mamdani's New York. We won't realize the American dream by consulting the Democratic Socialists of America's playbook." Other commentators have tried to dissect how exactly Mamdani rose from obscure New York State Assemblyman to rock star. Younger Democratic voters, they say, hew toward socialism. Older voters fall into the establishment wing. Here's a thought. The average American that goes to work, raises a family, enjoys sports, pop culture, or recreation in their spare time isn't thinking too much about political labels. What if, and stay with me here, Americans go for charisma over ideology? Did President Trump's base go out and tell all the political pollsters they were looking for a right-wing populist who hated free trade and immigration but loved corporations and was willing to go to the mat on cultural issues? No, Trump led them there. Trump has a certain charisma. Obama had a certain charisma. But Obama had a charisma. Maybe Mamdani won because he's a charismatic young political figure who listened and responded to New Yorkers' very real concerns about the cost of just about everything. And it does seem like other Democrats are paying attention.
We must reckon with the fact that everything is too damned expensive. From groceries to concert tickets to mortgages to cars to healthcare, we have created a world where one job isn't enough to raise kids.
So here's my free advice to that large coterie of political consultants that make hundreds of thousands per year dispensing advice that has become increasingly irrelevant. Maybe your candidates should just be who they are instead of follow some poll-tested formula. Maybe they should meet the voters where they are instead of trying to read reams of voter data to make their conclusions. So add this to the deluge of think pieces on Political Junkie's favorite topic. You can't solve an identity crisis if you don't authentically have an identity.
Coming up on Paris on Politics.
Israel, Iran, Ukraine, Russia. The world is on fire and the Chicago think tank aims to come up with answers. Plus, UChicago prepares to host the world's leading thinkers as the threat of nuclear war grows. Will the city allow owners to convert coach houses and attics into affordable housing? We debate a proposal on the so-called granny flats. And why City Council's longest tenured alderman is hanging it up and the familiar name he wants to replace him.
This is Paris on Politics from Fox 32 Chicago.
From the war in Israel and Gaza to the Russian invasion of Ukraine to the bombing of Iran to Trump's budding trade war. This is a critical time in world events, and the Chicago Council on Global Affairs is aiming to be at the forefront of the discussion. And it recently named a new leader, Dr. Leslie Vinjamuri, who spent 20 years with the prestigious Chatham House in London. And Dr. Vinjamuri joins us now. Great to talk to you and meet you, Dr. Vinjamuri, and thanks for being with us. I want to start with some of these geopolitical issues. As you know, Russian President Putin seems to have stepped up his bombing campaign in Ukraine. The talk of a ceasefire seems to be nowhere near the discussion. How do you see this conflict playing out, and is there a solution?
This is, as you know, this is a very difficult war, not least because Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin, has no intention and no interest in a ceasefire or in ending that war. And what's very interesting now is to see President Trump becoming much more frustrated, as I think many of us, including myself, thought he would. That he can't bring Putin really to the table in a meaningful way. And now taking a tougher line, right? Pushing back, making sure that there is still support, material support for Ukraine, but in that, in that thing that we all wish to see, which is Ukraine's sovereignty safeguarded, its ability to make its own choices about whether it leans into the West, safeguarded, that is just proving extremely difficult to ensure, as is stopping the fighting. And this, I think, is a real dilemma, mostly for the Ukrainians, but also for President Trump. So I think the unfortunate future for the foreseeable time is that this war is going to carry on, and America's support of Ukraine is critical during this transition from the U.S. being the dominant supporter, certainly on the weapons that they need most, to the EU and Europe in general really stepping up, which is something that Europe's trying very hard to do right now, and is moving in that direction. But I suspect that we are going to see ongoing fighting for quite some time. It's very unfortunate.
Certainly seems that way. You mentioned President Trump. I had read that one of your areas of expertise, among many, is the importance of multilateralism. You've written about this. What do you think the ultimate impact of President Trump's tariff policy is going to be, as it seems to be indiscriminate? It's hitting allies. It has some exorbitant numbers here. He says it's about balancing out the trade deficits, but how do you see this impacting not only the American economy, but the global economy?
Well, the unfortunate news is that President Trump's toing and froing on tariffs are creating a highly unstable global economy, a lot of unpredictability, and what America's trading partners, and this includes America's closest security allies, what they're trying to do right now is to, obviously negotiate and address some of President Trump's concerns in order to get a better deal on tariffs. That's their short-term goal. But what they're trying to do in the medium term is to diversify and to reduce their dependence on the United States and on the U.S. economy, and that's not great for America's longer-term interests. It's hardly surprising that when you are on the receiving end of the back and forth on tariffs and some threats of tariffs that could have a very, very damaging effect, that you would seek to do this. But it's not great for the U.S. It's not great for U.S. consumers. It's not great for U.S. businesses. And for the global economy writ large. We've had 8 decades where we've understood the importance of keeping, relatively open markets, but especially of having stable trading relationships, of having rules-based exchange, so that we can keep our people, our societies, our democracies, our economies as healthy as they can possibly be, as prosperous as they can possibly be, in part to prevent the really dangerous downward cycle of politics that can lead to the kinds of leaders that aren't really trying to provide for a better life for all of us. So I think that, the short term, the medium term, and also the long-term risks of this kind of policy are not great, which isn't to say that there isn't, a very good case for America asking more of its friends and its partners and its adversaries. Absolutely, we need to do that. But
Dr.
taking
Vijayamuri,
a measured approach is absolutely critical.
It's certainly a high-stakes game here. But while I have you, I just want to ask you briefly, what is your vision for the Chicago Council, and what is its role in the discussion about all these global matters?
Yeah, I thank you for asking me this. It couldn't be more important right now. The Chicago Council, as you know, formed in 1922, just a few years after the United States rejected the Treaty of Versailles, rejected internationalism, rejected the League of Nations. Here we are more than 100 years later at a real turning point in the United States when it matters what Americans think, what we wish our role to be on the global stage. The Chicago Council has been polling for 5 decades to really look carefully at what Americans think about trade, about NATO, about national security. We are doubling down on that research, taking it forward, but we are looking very hard to use that understanding that we've had over decades of the American public to forge some really critical and serious thinking on the big issues: trade, national security, the global economy. And also, and this is really important, we're a membership-based organization. We have phenomenal convening power. We have a wonderful convening space here right at the center of Chicago in the Prudential Building. And we will be bringing the most important leaders from across the United States, from across the world, elected officials, high-level experts, thought leaders, really bringing them out to talk to our audiences. We live stream, so there is a global as well as a local audience when we speak, but to really shape Americans' understanding and to really shape the public policy debate on America's global position over the next, especially over the next 3.5 years, but far beyond.
All right, Dr. Vinjamuri, we look forward to partnering with you, hopefully, on that, and many chats with you and the guests that you bring in. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.